Welcome once again, fans of all sports and things that probably don't pertain to your everyday life. Sean O'Connell and Geoff Schwartz, happy to be here to talk about whatever comes to mind. Geoff Schwartz,
Yes.
how are you?
Sean, I started swimming again. And I started last week
Okay.
and I progressively got a little bit better every day I've done it. I've done it 3 times now because my kids have a summer swim team they're on. And they have a parent relay to start the summer swim team. And last year I did the parent relay without practicing, just did it. And I got beaten by a neighbor who I shouldn't have gotten beaten by. Okay.
Wait. Your unathletic neighbor beat you at something athletic, is what you're telling me.
Yes. And also happened to be a 100-pound woman. So I need to get better at swimming. So I started swimming now, and maybe a mistake. I did upper body lift today, and then I swim afterwards. Mistake. I'm just not meant to be in the water very much, but I'm trying my best, buddy.
Dude, I am the worst swimmer on planet Earth, so I can sympathize with that. I actually admire the fact that even if you're not good at swimming, you're getting out there and you're doing it. I'm going to have to do that sooner than later because, like, I don't want to be in a situation where my kids are like, Dad, let's go swimming. And then they're like, oh, that's embarrassing.
Yeah. I told my kids what I'm doing. They laughed at me because they swim they're like, Dad, I swam 300 yards in about 10 minutes and it took you 20 minutes to do that. I'm like, well, yeah, you guys swim 4 times a week. So congratulations. Just roasting me per usual. All right, buddy. College football is the theme of our show today because no matter what, there's always college football talk now. Remember when we used to do radio years ago, back in the olden days, before the portal was a thing, Sean?
Yeah.
And this time of year, we were debating spring rosters. We had to pull out all the games on the radio, rank the coaches, who'd win in a fight, give me the mascot rankings, like all that stuff, right, man? And now, because of the portal, and today is the first day of the spring portal window, we have material to talk about and discuss roster transformation. Maybe not on the level we get in December, but the fact is we're seeing guys via Colorado's had 5 or 6 guys leave already. Louisville supposedly losing their whole offensive line. We have big names out there that haven't actually entered the portal yet, like a Caden Proctor, a Damian Martinez, the running back at Oregon State's in the portal. So it's not as impactful as December portal, but nonetheless, we're back into portal watch, Sean.
I actually push back a little bit on the notion that it might not be as impactful as that December window because what happens here is teams come out of spring ball and they know that now they have 20 practices before they actually play a real game. The coaches have finished their spring camp. Yeah. They've cut the film. They've watched the film. They know who got reps. They know who didn't. They know who they can trust. They know who they're a little bit dicey on. And they're shopping. They're saying, you know what, man? I really thought that A, B, or C player was going to be better for us. I really thought that this Geoff Schwartz kid was going to show some promise here in the spring, and he hasn't developed the way that we thought he would. So it turns out that we need to go out there. We need to find a Mitchell Schwartz.
Okay? That's rude. That is rude.
Those were both terrible examples because you guys were actually good college football players, right? What they're really doing is they're saying this O'Connell kid is awful. We got just send him out to wherever, tell him to transfer to 1AA school so we can open up a roster spot. We need someone we can actually play. We need someone that we can actually trust. And because nobody plays by the real rules, right, you're looking at a situation where LSU is like, gosh, I thought we were better at the running back position. We got to go get this Damian Martinez kid. And if you're Damian Martinez, if you're Jaden Ott, if you're any of these guys that, if you're Ollie Porter, that are just like a prime producer at the running back position, now Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, the haves are going to come in there and they're going to say, look, we know you're in a good situation, but I got $500,000 from my collective that says you might be in a better situation here in South Bend. And that is why I think this transfer portal window might be even more impactful because there's a little bit more desperation. There's a little bit more urgency is probably a better word for it from coaching staffs because they know what they've got or they have a better sense of what they've got right now.
I think that's absolutely true for the top level programs, right? Like the guys like we're seeing, as you mentioned, Damian Martinez going somewhere and he's a running back. I could see Alabama being super heavy in the portal right now, thinking, okay, we need these certain guys. But the competition, Sean, is there because guess what? Everyone needs offensive linemen. Everyone needs defensive linemen. And the SEC has a rule. You can't transfer within the conference, I think, in this period, right, Sean? So you're kind of have to look from outside to get some of those players in those schools. And look, is the transfer portal working like it should? Yes and no, right, Sean? Like, yes, players have more freedom. No, exactly what we talked about 2 years ago is happening, right? Which turned into complete free agency. I was against the portal. I don't think I was against the idea of players being able to move, but I knew we'd get to this point where it's open for agency. Damian Martinez, the running back from Oregon State, supposedly was getting $400,000 this year from Oregon State. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for Oregon State to pay a single player who is their best player on offense, obviously, probably their best player on the team at the moment. And they're like, he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go somewhere else and get $1 million, right? Like, this is not what it was supposed to be, but it's turned into that, Sean. And in my opinion, people say we need to put guardrails on it. Well, first of all you guys argued for player movement. So you can't argue for guardrails now. You asked for player movement. But secondly, there's no incentive to change because the people that would want to change are the ones benefiting the most from the transfer portal.
You're not going to get a nod of approval. You're not going to get a vote in favor of putting guardrails in place now from the powerful athletic directors, coaches, chancellors who are like, well, geez, we just got this kid out of the transfer portal who led us to a college football playoff. They're not. I mean, I'm thinking of the Pac-12 conference that we covered for so long, and the last 3 conference championship quarterbacks were Cam Rising, Michael Penix Jr. All right, the guy he was playing against, Michael Penix Jr. was playing against in the conference championship in 2023 was also a transfer portal player. The guy that Cam Rising beat in the 2022 conference championship game was a transfer portal player. This is a reshaping of the way things are done in college football. And so putting that genie back in the bottle, it's not happening. Can you calm it down? Can you structure it a little bit better? Guardrails might be a hot button word for people, but can you institute some rules to make it make more sense? And I think that's something that you have to at least evaluate. There's not a lot of practicality going on in college football right now. You at least have to evaluate a return to some more practical measures. And that's something that, the powers that be should be talking about. But instead, they're talking about further expanding the college football playoff, potentially breaking away from the NCAA, because it's just absolutely bananas right now.
I think the guardrail that probably is easiest to put on, obviously, is limiting to one transfer, Sean.
Yes.
Like a lot of guys we're seeing in the portal in the last 24 hours are guys making their second, third, and fourth transfer. And that's the problem, right? Is that players are entering the portal because they think the grass is greener, and it almost never is. For the top guy, like I saw a Texas A&M safety, 5-star kid, Oregon's considering him. I would imagine he's going to Oregon. Okay, yeah. 7 guys, 11 guys go to Oregon. A couple guys go to Utah, right? A couple guys go here. Most guys go from Oregon to Louisville and then transfer again. Oregon, Jackson State, transfer again. And they think grass is greener. Now, to be fair, Sean, we know this. It's called, what's it called when they process, right? They process the players out. Coaches are also telling players get lost. Now,
yes,
if you're a player, I guess you can stand firm, but you would never play, right? I mean, you have a miserable existence being on a team that won't play you, but you're on that team still, I guess. And maybe there's injuries and things happen and you stick it out. But the fact is, a lot of players that are going somewhere are not going to have the same experience at school 2. And they want to find that experience again in school 3 and school 4 and school 5. And we're seeing a lot of players like entering the portal, man. Their second and third and fourth. If they had one transfer, Sean, one time, I think they would take it a little more seriously. I'm not saying they're not taking it seriously, but they wouldn't jump on the first offer they had. And they might not, and they might say to themselves, you know what? I'm not going to transfer. I'm going to wait. I want to wait for that one-time transfer I get.
Yeah, that would be, I think, a better rule. Legally, you're not ever going to be able to institute it because there's going to be people who challenge it, and there's going to be folks who say, well, from a mental health standpoint, he needs to transfer a second time or she needs to transfer a third time. And then, the school can't block it. And then you get back into that discussion of, well, what's the threshold? Where is the, hey, this rule has to be hard and fast when someone says, well, my grandma's fading fast. My family needs me back home, especially now that it's obvious and legal that a lot of these student athletes are now breadwinners for extended family, right? So from a practical standpoint, can you institute that change? A lot of legwork would have to be done. It would make the most sense. Yeah. And I actually would be even a little bit more flexible than you. And I would say you're able to transfer one time within each division, right? So if you are a 1AA player or an FCS player, as it's called now, if you're an FCS player, you can transfer from Southern Utah to Stephen F. Austin.
Okay.
And then if you get the call up to Houston, you can transfer to Houston. And then if somehow, even after all that instability, even after all that movement, you have a great year at Houston, and now Oklahoma State wants you, you can transfer to Oklahoma State. Because I have been for and will continue to be for the mirroring of real life when you're embarking on your college experience. And right now, college football, college basketball, the transfer-heavy sports mirror mostly the negative side of your freedoms in a job market, right? Yes, it's wonderful when a guy or a gal is able to transfer to a school where they can capitalize on more name, image, and likeness opportunities. Right. When they can go from North Texas to UCLA and you're graduating beyond a certain level of football to big-time football, and people are paying more attention to you, and the NFL is paying a little bit more attention to you and all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's going to happen for you if you're good at your job in real life.
Correct.
But we have to acknowledge that in a lot of places, and in most cases, what you're seeing are guys that think they should be a starter at the University of Alabama, so they put their name in the transfer portal, and everybody who watches their film and everybody who evaluates them and everybody who calls their position coach and says, hey, what do I need to know about this kid, gets this conclusion like, you know what? You're not Alabama material. You're not even Southern Alabama material. So you need to go play at a JUCO or whatever. That happens in the job market too. That happens in real life too. So that's just something that when we talk about new rules, we talk about instituting guardrails, you want it to mimic real life. But in real life, hopefully you have some guidance, some opportunity for wiser people to advise you and to say, look, don't quit this job just yet. You're probably not going to get that number one spot as a web developer for Google that's paying you $650,000 a year. So let's just hang out, work for the U.S. Postal Service until you're sure that something better comes along.
Yes, I'm with you there on mimicking real life. The one pushback I have on the mental health part of this, Sean, is I'm not sure it's great for your mental health to transfer every year and find a, if you want to argue that, I'd argue that maybe having better mental health services at schools would be a better solution than just saying, well, they need to transfer because, I'd argue that a guy transferring to his third school in 3 years is not great for anybody. It's not great for the kid. It's not great for their family unless they're getting more money, which could be possible, but we're talking about players. I think that, not to your point about leveling up, players that are almost leveling down. They're not making money. And now you're finding new friends, a new school, a new atmosphere every year. Even people in the job market don't change jobs every year or every 6 months. You got guys every 6 to 9 months. It doesn't happen, of course. But the fact is, this is not good for the players either. Yeah. They have to endure the transfers every year.
No, you're right. And if you do that in the job market, by the way, now people start to scratch their heads when they look at your resume and they say, maybe you're not a good organizational fit for anywhere. Maybe you're the problem here. And that's something that I think college athletes are having to learn the hard way. And maybe someone who's an advocate for the current system would say, look, it's better that they learn that now. And then when they get out into the real world and get into the job market, they realize that you shouldn't be looking for greener grass a month after you start your current job. But what you've got right now is a model of football, especially, and college basketball as well, that is not ruining anything, but it is threatening the way that fans have engaged with teams for a long time, that
Yeah.
supporters have engaged with teams for a long time, that alumni donors have engaged for a long time. And I'm not convinced that Notre Dame and Alabama and, LSU, I'm not convinced that it's ever going to be any different for them. But I really think that there's going to be a situation with the 1B, right? Not the top tier schools, but the ones that are just below them, where people are looking at it, and these donors who have gotten excited about name, image, and likeness and have said, you know what? Yeah, let's make this team a factor. Let's get the University of Colorado back on the map. And they're probably the best example of this. At some point, those people who've given millions of dollars to Deion Sanders and his collective are going to look at it and just be like, there's no return on investment here.
Yeah.
We're not getting the results that we wanted. The reputation of this school might not be what I like for it to be right now, because, Shedeur Sanders just did that thing where he posted him showing up at a physical class with, like, not prepared at all. Like, that might be something that, some guy who built a chemicals company and is now donating back to Colorado football looks like he goes, this is not what I was signing up for. I think that the powers that be are always going to be the powers that be, and the upward mobility teams that we've seen because of name, image, and likeness are at risk of crashing back down to earth if we don't regulate this a little bit, if we don't fix this a little bit.
Well, fixing the NIL part of it would fix transfer portal, obviously, right? Because if you have some sort of cap on that, but again, capping a free market system is going to be hard to do.
Sure.
If they make them employees, then that changes the whole game. But I think we're years away from that actually happening.
What if you made it so that in order to receive NIL money, in order to get a dime of NIL money, you actually had to produce on the field? You actually, if they were all incentive based, if somehow you could institute that rule, and again, I don't think you can, but if it was like, hey, look, you're going to offer this high school kid $1 million to come to your school. He can't get $1 of it unless he scores a touchdown for you. Now it's on you as the coach to make sure you coach him up, develop him, and you got to put that kid in at some point. You know?
Get him a touchdown. Otherwise, he's like, I'm leaving. Look,
that'd make it worse.
That's sort of, in a way, is pro sports, right? You get paid for your production. Yeah. Now you'd argue sometimes you get paid for past production, not future production.
Correct.
That'd be different than your system where you get paid for future production over past production. But yeah, look, there's probably creative ways to make it different. But then I go back to this point, like who is going to, hey, buddy, I'm trying to do a show here. You're fine.
The Schwartz household is still relatively new in the dog world.
We are. It's incentive for who's going to want to make that change. Who's going to be the first high-profile coach or school? Now, there have been coaches like Jim Harbaugh and Lane Kiffin have said, "Hey, man, we should pay the players." I think Chip Kelly said that too. Maybe not Lane, but Chip and Jim Harbaugh for sure. Okay, great. They're already doing that. They want to make it official. But who's going to be the first coach who's going to say, you know what, guys, NIL, I don't like it. And there's like 4 coaches that matter. They can actually say, if Kirby Smart said this, it would matter, right? But Kirby's not going to say it because he's getting the benefit of that. Dan Lanning is not going to say it.
Dabo Swinney's been saying it, and it hasn't mattered.
Well, Dabo's in his own.
But you're talking like the examples you throw out are guys who are like credentialed the way that Dabo is, right? And Dabo has been like, won't do it, not participating in the transfer portal thing, which he doesn't. Right?
I think he got one this year, but
they brought it. That brings the grand total to 4.
To 4, yeah.
For Dabo. 4 transfer players in the transfer portal era for Dabo. And instead of being like, you know what, maybe we should listen to this guy who's a national championship level coach, right? Who's one of the highest paid coaches in the game. Instead of listening to him, most people are just like, Dabo, you're a quack because you're fighting against a tide that is absolutely carrying everything away. And by the way, you're doing it at the detriment of Clemson football because you're not shoring up your roster the way that everyone else is. So it's going to take more than just an influential coach saying, I don't like this. We already have one. And his name is Dabo Swinney. He hates it. Yeah. And it's going to cost him his job instead of creating change.
Well, he still wins 10 games, which is wild. Imagine if he participated in the current climate of of college sports right now. I mean, he winning more championships again. So look, again, you're portaling right now. Just remember this, Sean, and as we end with this. The portal is good if it helps your team. The portal is bad if it hurts your team. Okay. So for me as an Oregon Duck, it's great. I love it. For Utah, Dorian Singer, like you're getting some dudes to show up with Utah. Good for Utah. If you're a group of 5 school, sorry, sucks for you because you're losing all your good players.
See, and I don't feel bad for the group of 5 teams because you know what you are. Okay, you don't have the resources. It's a ladder to climb. You're a middle.
I finally did it. I finally did, everyone. I got Sean to be an elitist. It's taken 5 years for Sean to be an elitist.
No,
this has always been my take, and Sean now is on board. Thank you, everyone.
You're a middle rung on the ladder if you're at a group of 5. That's how the coaches treat it. That's how the position coaches treat it. That's how the players are now allowed to treat it. And you know what? That's totally fine because, again, that mimics real life. That mimics the world that we live in. Everyone had their starter home, and then they upgraded, and then people are hoping to get that Jeff Schwartz mansion someday, right? All of us are trying to get like a fancy German Shepherd trained by Ricky Bobby's rival, and at the same time, you're hopefully enjoying yourself along the way.
Yeah,
that's what Group of 5 schools are right now. They're a place for people to look good, to compete, and if that's the ceiling that you personally reach, that there's no shame in that. If you're good enough to get a phone call from Notre Dame after excelling at the Group of 5 level, by all means. That's the upward mobility that we hoped we would see in the transfer portal. But you're absolutely right. There's too much of the I'm jumping into the transfer portal and I'm dying there. That system is what scares people, and that system is what sucks. And maybe, just maybe, a hard line, one-time transfer rule would maybe not fix it all the way, but would help it significantly.
I think we're on the right track with a lot of these, but nothing's going to happen. So at least for a little bit, I feel like everyone says change needs to happen, Sean. Someone's actually have to do it, and I don't know who that person's going to be.
It's not going to be Dan Lanning at Oregon.
No, it's not. Please don't change that. Please, no changing rules before we win a championship. Speaking of actual football now, we have spring games happening, Sean, and game is pretty loose for what we're calling some of these things we're seeing on television. Ohio State had theirs on national television on Fox. They're wearing the little helmet cap thing, so there not much didn't happen in there. I took a peek at Utah's spring game. Looked more like practice, right? Was it more like a practice than an actual game?
Well, look, it was a game for anyone who was third string and below. It was a practice for anyone who was second string or higher.
Okay. What do we take away, or what are lessons from spring games, Sean? Because I feel like these are the only times we get in spring ball we get to see any of these players actually play because coaches restrict practice. We talked about the access. I think spring ball should be open to the public. Like, this is the time of year where you want everyone to see what you're doing and get excitement. But what do you take away from watching a Utah spring game? Ohio State won Michigan's this weekend on Big Fox as well. What do you take away from it?
Spring football is information gathering on the depth of your team and nothing more. There's going to be a situation where somebody who you're excited about watching in the fall gets injured in the fall or gets injured in fall camp. And when that happens, hopefully you have some sense of what the depth chart looks like behind them. Now, if you're a sure thing rotational player, if you're like a firmly established 2 in a lot of these schools, you're not participating a ton in spring football anyway because you're a potential starter. If you're an already established starter, you're probably not participating at all in a spring game. Maybe the first couple weeks of spring practice, they were helping knock some rust off you and things like that. But once you had confirmed what the coaches thought about you, they start to taper off. They let the young guys play more. It's information gathering for how much depth your team has, because those injuries, unfortunately, in college football are inevitable. They do happen. And there's going to be a situation where you say, I think we watched this guy who transferred in from Michigan in the Utah spring game, and he's a corner. You know what? I think he's going to be all right. I think this Moroni Anai kid who was balling out in the spring game, who now has to start 2 games at linebacker because Corene Reed is hurt. I think we're going to be okay if we see him playing. That's all it is. So you have to be a real fan. You have to care about not just the glitz, the glamour, the starters, the guys who are driving the free trucks and getting the NIL money. You have to care about, well, what's special teams going to look like, and what's the depth chart so that we can win 10-plus games this year. That's what you should be looking at in spring football. Depth, and that's all at this point.
Until they all transfer out. And then you're screwed about all the players you like. No.
Well, that's a great point, but maybe that's something that you can also assess from spring games and spring practices is like, what kind of a grasp do these coaches have on the culture of your team? Because if you're keeping those guys engaged and you've got those guys competing, it's more likely they're going to stay. If you just tuck a bunch of them to the side, those are the guys that are going to be in the transfer portal.
Remember last spring when Lamonius Craig caught that like 80-yard touchdown for Colorado, and about 4 hours later he entered the portal.
Montana Lamonius Craig was the only glimmer of hope for Colorado in the offense at all, talent-wise. He was the only thing that you could look at and be like, wow, they've got something. And then he was gone. Yeah. He had like a stellar spring football game. And it was like his showcase, and that was the film that he sent out and was just like, see you later, not hanging out here.
Sean, to me, the spring game should be about hope, right? This is why I think football is different than other sports, is the hope of fan bases in the spring for the spring for college football into the summer, and then the NFL, obviously. I've talked about this for years now, the best hope of any sports league, right? Like, you look at the NFL and 27 teams think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Now, college football is not quite the same, right? Because there are teams, not everyone's going to win it. But to me, it's the hope, right? It's that you're looking for, to your point about depth, though, it's part of it, right? Like, you're hopeful that depth will help you win a championship. Now, that championship might be a conference championship, or, for some teams it's 8 wins, like, okay. But to me, it's about hope, right? It's seeing these players in the spring, whether it's a new quarterback, new wide receiver, a new offensive lineman, a new defensive lineman that you have not seen all spring because you cannot watch spring practice, and you get that glimmer of them, and you want to leave your spring game as a fan with hope. Now, the other happens where you're like, is Will Howard that good? Like, the quarterback, like there's a part of that where you're like, I don't know. Yeah. But to me, it's about hope, right? If you're a fan of any school that has a new quarterback, look at Cam Ward at Miami. I don't know what they're doing, for their spring game. Dylan Gabriel. You look at what USC has with a new quarterback. You look at Notre Dame with a new quarterback. All these teams with new quarterbacks. And you want to see that glimmer of hope in that spring showcase. And that, to me, is what it's about. It's getting your fan. And this is why I argue about you need to have spring practice open to the media, is because you want your fans to get that excitement and hope for the upcoming season. And that's different. Again, that's different for everyone, right? What Colorado's hope is different than USC's. What Penn State's is different than Michigan State. But imagine you're Michigan State right now, a brand new coach who I think has done a good job of bringing in a roster as soon as possible. Like, wouldn't you want, and again, I don't know if the practices are open or not, so I'm just using them as an example, but wouldn't you want like a giant showcase every single day of spring practice? This is what our team is. And I think coaches miss out on that opportunity to do that because of secrecy. Like, I don't know. It's spring practice. Who cares? No one's going to steal your signs in spring practice. So to me, it's hope, Sean. You want to leave your spring game with hope about your program.
Yeah, I'll double down on that and say it's not just hope for the 2024 season. It's like hope for the direction of the program in general, because I know that was one of the main conversations that was coming out of Utah's spring football game was, Cam Rising threw the ball around a little bit, and it was nice to see him upright and actually playing football for the fans who are excited to see him back this year. But it was also about Isaac Wilson. It was also about like this freshman kid who's coming in and is going to be competing for Cam's job when Cam is gone. That was absolutely one of the main conversations. And again, it's more big picture stuff, but those are the fans who show up to a spring showcase. Those are the season ticket holders, the people who, as soon as your season is done in December or hopefully January, they're just like, gosh dang it, when do we get this football again? Like, this is their brief little taste, right? It's like the sampling at Costco. You're like, aha, there it is. That reminds me why I'm here. That reminds me of why I love this team. That reminds me why I'm optimistic about next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. So spring football, I still love spring football. I still love the spring football game because of what it is. It's that signpost. It's that stop on the football calendar that you're halfway through the misery and that we'll be back talking about the real stuff in 4 months.
It's closer than that, right? I mean, we start getting into it in July. I mean, I just saw the Big 12 announce their spring, their media day, Sean, in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, so not Resorts World, and it's I think the 11th and 12th. I'm excited. Hopefully, you get to go and you can see Cam Rising's knee up close in person again, playing pickleball and scream out. I've still not gotten my apology from Utah yet. I'm waiting for that apology to come through. Haven't received it yet. I'm sure it'll come one day, Sean.
You know what? I on the 1 year when we get to Big 12 media days, I'm going to release. I think I have video, right? Because I was taking a video
of me
on my
saying
phone.
That.
Yes,
I think you've released it before.
I'm going to release it again. Some people need to see things, right? People need to see things multiple times. People need to refresh their memory of Geoff Schwartz, just Lenny from A Mice and Men.
Do you know, I tried to explain who Lenny was to my wife recently. I said, do you know who? I went on Wikipedia. I was like, so Lenny is this big guy who's a little over aggressive with some animals and humans, by the way. And he doesn't know how strong he is.
Geoff Schwartz in a relatively quiet interview space as Cam Rising picks up a pickleball paddle. Oh, you're trying to see how his knee's doing? Is that why you're filming?
By the way, he looked great too. He actually
did.
Looked really good. I was surprised. Not surprised. I thought he wouldn't play, but
sorry, George. I just wanted to pet them rabbits.
Oh, jeez.
Just you over there, just shouting it out.
Shouting it out.
Good.
All right. Well, let's start with the Big 12 and a little bit of a kind of a preview for the upcoming season, but just kind of sort of big picture questions for all four power conferences. We're saying that now, but all four power conferences, Sean. So we had kind of in the end of spring ball, a couple spring games left, heading into what now is the portal season, but obviously in the training camp. In the Big 12, it feels like, and this is rare, do we see that a new team coming to the conference in Utah is the favorite. And I'm just curious sort of who is in the level of the Utes that can compete. Now, remember, Texas, Oklahoma are gone. I'm not sure I trust Oklahoma State right now. Kansas State's always tough, but they lost their quarterback, obviously. And just trying to figure out, is Utah really going to be that team that enters a new conference and immediately wins it?
I think that they are going to be that team that's in the conversation beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. Who else is there with them it's kind of a pick 'em, right? Because you mentioned Oklahoma State. You don't trust Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State brings back 5 starters on the offensive line, one of the best running backs in college football, a quarterback who's been given a 7th year of eligibility, much like Utah's quarterback has, and you brought in some receivers in the transfer portal because your wide receiving core was pretty underwhelming, right? So, and by the way, they're still shopping in that transfer portal. So every piece of conversation we have today about all the outlook is going to adjust next week when you start to get a picture of who lands where in the post-spring transfer window. So I'm not writing off Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy flies under the radar. Kyle Whittingham is universally talked about as like this example of longevity and fortitude and doing it the right way at the University of Utah. And he's kind of like the strong, silent type. Yeah. He's not certainly as outspoken and mulleted as Gundy is, but their records are very comparable. And actually, Gundy outpaces Whittingham in a lot of the important metrics. So he's a really good coach. Yeah. I think he's less likable on the universal scale, and that's why he doesn't get the respect. But Oklahoma State scares me a little bit. Kansas has that big question. You lost your quarterback for the entire year last year, an incredibly talented guy. It altered the entire outcome for your season. Who does that sound like? It's exactly what happened to Utah last year.
Yeah.
Now, they don't have the defense at Kansas that Utah
and the talent,
does.
Really.
They're not Kansas football and Utah football. It's a complimentary comparison for Kansas, not for Utah. But we've seen when quarterbacks really kind of like elevate a team. And I think you've got a guy at Kansas who can do so. And then, of course, Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona's surprising. Their odds, they have the 4th best odds to win the conference right now. And obviously they have Noah Fafita and they have Territory McMillan, but a lot of what they did last year offensively was Jed Fish, obviously in year 3, he's not there anymore. And defensively, Johnny Nance being there was huge to what they did. And I just don't know. It was such a big jump last year in defense that typically doesn't stay year after year if your defensive coordinator leaves.
Yep. So there's a lot of questions at Arizona, but they've had to answer these questions year after year after year without talent on the roster. And they have talent on the roster now. So, you brought in a good coaching staff. Are they as good as Jed Fish? Probably not. Maybe not. Right? He did an unbelievable job of building that team, talent, culture very quickly at the University of Arizona. But he also could have taken every one of those guys with him to Seattle, and they chose to stay in Tucson. So there's something to that. There's reasons for that, right? So, Tatero McMillan would be welcome on every single roster in college football. It's a minor miracle, after we were just talking about the transfer portal. It's a minor miracle that he's not in an Alabama uniform. It really is, or an Ohio State uniform. But he's staying at Arizona. He's playing with his high school buddies. He's living the college dream while also taking advantage of the name, image, and likeness opportunities, cashing some checks, enjoying the Tucson scenery and weather. It's a great story. Hopefully, we get to see them win.
I am curious about Arizona in this conference with the changes they have at coach, and you mentioned on defense and the return starters. To me, it does feel like Kansas State, though, is the biggest concern for Utah, right? Kansas State every year is Utah light, probably not as talented as Utah, but they got Avery Johnson quarterback now, who's probably a little more dynamic than Howard. And it does feel like those games between Utah and Kansas State from here on forward are just going to be a lot of fun, man. Like they're the same team, right? And Utah's just, I think, more talented and has the coaching staff that's done it longer. And I think that there'll be fun games to watch, but that Utah probably wins that conference.
I hope you're right, obviously, as a Utah alum. It would be a fun story in college football that, the fallout from the death of the Pac-12 reshapes other conferences by immediately a team coming in and winning a championship. But for me, a bigger question with the Big 12 and with whoever the champion is, whether that's Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah, some surprise team, the bigger question for me is, how big is the gap between a reconstructed Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10? In a 12-team college football playoff, how many Big 12 teams are in there? Your conference champion is going to be there. How many other teams are going to be making a case for inclusion? How big is the gap between the Big 12, who right now is hopefully the third best Power 4 conference, and the two that are obviously deeper and obviously more top heavy while being deeper? That's the scary thing for me, because this is where we were for the last 10 years, Geoff, with
out west,
talking about the Pac-12 hey, look, your best team in the Pac-12 is Utah. And then nationally people go, yeah, but Utah can't hang. Utah doesn't even belong in the conversation. Your champion is a 3-loss Utah team. Our champion is competing for the Natty. That's my concern with the Big 12.
I think it's certainly fair. I'll tell you what, man, I'm looking at schedules right now. Utah gets no Kansas, no Kansas State. They're at Oklahoma State in September, followed by Arizona. So a rough 2-game stretch, but they get Arizona at home. And then it's Arizona State, TCU, Houston, bye week. You get BYU at home, at Colorado, Iowa State, at UCF. It's a pretty good schedule, man.
It is. It's a good schedule.
It's a good schedule.
Oklahoma State also has a good schedule because a lot of what you're talking about, and they get the Utes at home. So there's it's potentially a favorable year for your preseason favorites when it comes to scheduling, and that hopefully hopefully means that you've got, a 1-loss, 2-loss champion, and the runner-up being also a 1-loss, 2-loss team.
That's what you need.
That's what you need.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have this sort of standalone, this lone wolf in the conference championship game. And you're going to have a dozen articles coming out about how, you know what, there's just.
I mean, what is the second place Big 12 team? So if you have, let's say you have two teams competing 11-1, probably unlikely, right? Probably
pretty unlikely.
Probably what, 11-1, 10-2?
Probably.
Does 10-3 in the Big 12 get you into the 12th spot, or it'll be 11th spot, I guess?
I mean, you have to see how it all plays out elsewhere, because we did this with, if the 12-team playoff was this year, what would the matchups look like? And, a 3-loss Utah team was going to be there. But
yeah, I think you have to hope the next conference, we'll talk about the ACC, has one playoff team. I mean, right now you look at the ACC, Florida State has DJU at quarterback. We watched them last season, Sean. I don't see conference winner at quarterback for Florida State. They lose a lot. Florida State loses a lot of talent off that team last season. Clemson, I mean, look, again, we might make fun of Dabo, but he wins a lot of football games. But is he going to win enough to be a second playoff team? Like, if they win the conference, Sean, is he enough to be a second playoff team? I think the same questions we have about the Big 12. How good can the conference be? The ACC is in the same boat, maybe worse. Like, if Florida State loses 2 or 3 games, they're not in the playoff probably. Clemson loses 2 or 3 games. Of course, they win the conference, they'll be in. Miami, look, I think Mario Cristobal's a good coach, but Cam Ward worries me as far as a conference winning quarterback. There are some warts. Watch him play for the last 2 seasons now. And I just don't know if the quarterback play in this conference is good enough to produce 2 teams to the playoff.
NC State, I think, is going to end up winning the ACC this year.
Plus 1,400, the fifth longest odds. A big jump, by the way. Clemson, Florida State, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Louisville, all within plus 470. NC State plus 1,400.
It's really fascinating to me because I like Grayson McCall. I really think that he's a good player. And he's very experienced, and I probably overcorrect on this, but whenever I see a guy who's been given less, he's at a group of 5 school, or he's at a Division I AA school or whatever, I see them succeeding with less, putting in a situation where now they should have more. And what the Wolfpack have done in the transfer portal, I think, qualifies as now Grayson McCall has better talent around him than he had at Coastal Carolina. Now, is it better talent relative to the competition? You still, I guess, have to prove that. But it's a well-coached team, and they're always like kind of hanging around. This could be a breakthrough year for them because of some of what we talked about already. Because of the fact that Clemson isn't keeping up with the Joneses, right? Because of the fact that you don't believe in Cam Ward at Miami. Because of the fact that Florida State has kind of installed its own glass ceiling in a lot of ways, and they lost a lot of talent. So this could be a breakout year for NC State, in my opinion.
The NC State thing is tough because their schedule, they got Clemson and Tennessee in September. I mean, you start with 2 losses there, and you're not making.
But Tennessee doesn't affect your conference championship.
Correct,
stats.
but just as far as about overall, like if they're second in the conference, with a loss, are they a playoff team essentially with Tennessee? The thing about Grayson McCall that I think worries me a little bit is, did no other sort of, for lack of a better term, like big dog schools that need quarterbacks want him? I mean, he did. I think he committed fairly early to NC State, right? It was like one of those like do not call me tags put on his transfer window or transfer portal window. And he didn't play as well last year, different coach, different offense, a little more injured, obviously last season, but 2022, really good. 21, really good. I will say though, this is, I think again, sort of what will he be? He didn't throw for more than 2,900 yards in any season at Coastal Carolina. That's not a lot of yards, man. Like they ran the ball a bunch. They
Yeah,
were,
but and also name for me the best wide receiver or tight end at his
oh no,
disposal in that time.
oh no,
You know?
he did transfer super early, December 13th. So that was like super early in that window. No, he has better players now, absolutely. And NC State would be, I think, the dark horse. They've now won 8 straight wins, 4 straight years. Pretty impressive, man. I will say though, I really like and I root for coaches that come into a program, Sean, and build the program up and sort of stay there, right? Now, of course, Dave Doran might leave at some point if he gets a better offer. I'm fine with that idea. But the fact is they stuck with him and it's paid off. He's gotten that team to be respectable. And it might be the Wolfpack year. The women in the Final Four, the men in the Final Four. DJ Burns, man, go play left tackle. You get some eligibility left. Go play left tackle for your
Get
for
that
your
guy
Wolfpack.
on the football field somehow. Even if all he does is just stand in the middle on PAT block.
Yep.
You know, get your arms up, son.
Is Mario Cristobal on the hot seat, Sean? 12 and 13 through 2 years now at Miami. I'm surprised, to be honest with you. Honestly, I know him well from his time at Oregon. He took a team that was 6-6. I think first year there, he was the coach. They went 8-4, 8-5. Ugly bowl win, 7-6 against Michigan State. They won the Rose Bowl in year 2. Now, he had Justin Herbert. But remember, he didn't use Justin Herbert quite like he should.
That's right.
And it's not like they had a bunch of pro guys on defense. They just the offensive line was the best in the country, though. That obviously very helpful. Miami's offensive line is getting better. But like I kind of thought they would.
They didn't have a bunch of pro guys on defense. He had Kayvon Thibodeau on those teams.
That was it, right?
No, what about they had the corner. Christian Gonzalez was coached by Mario Cristobal.
He was on that team. He was on Lanning's first year.
It was
Javon,
he was at Colorado then.
Javon Holland.
Javon Holland.
That's who it was.
Sorry, so Javon Holland, not Christian Gonzalez.
2 guys a lot on a.
All right.
On a.
I overestimated.
Maybe Vern McKinley's 3. Did he play that year? I don't know if he played with that year. Doesn't matter. We're getting too deep in the rabbit hole. I don't know why it's not going better in Miami because he's recruiting just as well. He has, I think, are good coaches. And I know there wasn't a lot there when he got there, like especially in the lines. He built the lines up last year. They're better off in defensive line. Obviously, that loss to Georgia Tech, if you take that off, make that a win, your record looks much better. But I kind of expect him to get to 10 wins last year, and he didn't. And I don't know what he has to do this year to change who he is as a coach to get back to 10 wins. Because if he doesn't win 9 games, is he there next season?
I don't think he is.
Yeah.
And this is probably why putting your eggs in the basket, the Cameron Ward basket, is scary for some people. Yeah. I like Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward's a good player. Cam Ward is one of those guys that we saw step up from a lower division school to a Pac-12 school, but it was not – it's upward mobility certainly, but it's not upward mobility from a, hey, you're great, your team is great at the level you're at to another team that's great at the level they're at. He went from a really super solid FCS program to a mid-level to rebuilding Pac-12 program. And hopefully Miami is beyond that now. But this is where the rubber meets the road for Cam Ward and for Mario Cristobal. And tying your fate to a guy who's now at his 3rd school is probably not the most advisable thing. But this is, again, going back to our previous discussion about the transfer portal, this is the environment that we have created, that players and coaches together have created, to where if you're Mario Cristobal, you had to go through the transfer portal and be like, gosh, this is a make or break year for me. Who do I want here? And maybe your first choice wasn't available to you. Cam Ward probably wasn't your first choice. So now you're riding with a guy who's certainly, I think, an upgrade, but is he your first choice? Is he Bo Nix? Is he Michael Penix Jr.? Is he Caleb Williams?
Probably
Certainly not.
No, probably not. And you obviously will go as far as your quarterback will take you in that offense, right? And it's just the way it is. But, I mean, if you look at, talent level-wise, I mean, Cam Ward might be the best talent, just actual physically gifted quarterback at the top of that conference. I mean, Cade Klubnik is not as physically gifted, I would say. DJU's not. I got to look up who's playing for Louisville. Grayson
JU's just physically gifted as a tight end and not as a quarterback.
No, that's going to doom Florida State, in my opinion. So that's an ACC kind of questions we have entering out of spring ball. I think for the SEC, Sean, my two things. Three things. I'll talk. Is Ole Miss finally going to break through by beating Alabama or Georgia or Oklahoma or Texas, like someone who they need to beat to sort of break that next level? Right now, at 10-2, they could easily be a playoff team, but they need that win. Like they need to. They put a lot of money into portaling and building the roster up and being better. Are they finally going to break through? Number two, Kalen DeBoer, first year Alabama. Is he going to be the winner that we've seen at Washington, at Fresno State? I lean yes. He got to coach his ass off. Like we know this now. Like it's set in stone. The question is players, right? Does he have good enough players to do that? And three, I think, is Oklahoma, Texas. I'm curious to see how that transition works, right? Oklahoma, not as I think well situated at the moment as Texas is to make that transition, especially at quarterback position. But those are three things that to fascinate me heading into the end of spring ball, but heading into training camp.
Well, the SEC is fascinating for a lot of reasons because you've got the old regulars, you've got other blue blood programs in Texas and Oklahoma that are jumping in, and then you've got like Missouri, who might be the third best team in the conference this year, when it shouldn't be the case, right?
Yeah.
So Georgia's going to be great. Georgia's going to be great. Alabama, I think, is on its way. I mean, you asked that question. We know that Kalen DeBoer can coach his ass off. Does he have the players? He's at Alabama. Yes, the players are there. Like Alabama has not suffered for the last 2 decades from a lack of talent. It just hasn't happened. So I think Kalen DeBoer, maybe it takes him, the first season to kind of figure that out. But then you've got Eli Drinkwitz hanging out, just being like, "What about us, guys?" And everyone's like, "Oh, wait, yeah." And again, this is maybe the bright and shiny side of the transfer portal and of NIL opportunities, because they don't have the same batting average as Alabama and Georgia and Texas, who's now in the conference. They just don't. Like they're never going to be able to compete with the spending at the disposal of Texas A&M, but they've got a great coach and they've got enough support to incentivize the players that matter to them to stay. And they've got enough support to incentivize guys that are in the transfer portal and want to be part of something that, is building and is potentially going to upset the apple cart, that you can get some of those guys there. It's not level 1 guys. It's not everyone else's first choice. It's like, but it's 1B or it's 2, and those guys are going to be at Missouri. So that's intriguing to me.
No, I think Missouri is sort of fascinating as a team on the outer edge that could, with the right sort of things happening to them, Sean, can end up getting to where they're a legit playoff team. But this conference is just so deep. And 2 teams we haven't even talked about. I mean, LSU got to replace a lot: quarterback, wide receivers. So your 3 wide receivers and your quarterback. It's going to 2 wide receiver quarterback, hard to do. And then, I mean, Tennessee has a ton of talent too. I mean, this conference, Sean, it wouldn't surprise me if 3 to 5 teams end up winning it.
It wouldn't surprise me if there are. What's the maximum on the current system that a conference can get into the 12-team expanded playoff? It wouldn't surprise me if they've got 7 in there.
Well, they'd have to pick out some of the Big Ten, right? I mean, you look at the Big Ten right now. You look at Ohio State and Oregon, probably at the top of that. I hate how much talent Oregon has, Sean. It bothers me because the expectations are like really. I went and looked at the roster, man. I mean, I saw a tweet from Jim Nagy, executive director of the Senior Bowl, who said they have 29 players they're scouting for the NFL, like eligible for the NFL draft after this season. It's a lot of good football players. Like it worries me that how much talent Oregon has.
Look,
in Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Sean. James Franklin 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. He can't beat them. Do I take them seriously to win the conference? So Ohio, the Michigan probably pulls back a little bit. I think we agree on that, right? So you get Ohio State, Oregon in there. Does Penn State get in as a third? Does USC bounce back? Washington, I don't think, is a playoff team this year. So that can make the SEC with 4 to 6 if the Big Ten has 2.
Yeah, I think Oregon has, for me, done as good of a job as anyone else in the marriage of the two recruiting strategies now that you have to have, where you're still getting top flight high school recruits. You're still buttering your bread with players that are going to stay and develop. And I think that, they can incentivize people to stick around at Oregon. I think that just that campus is not a place where, even if your football life is not perfect as a freshman, I don't think you're immediately jumping into the transfer portal, because the community, the campus, people are just like, okay, I'm going to stick this out. You're more likely to think that way at Oregon. I think that Dan Lanning and his coaching staff have built that culture as successfully as you can in the short time that he's been there. And then they're also adding top flight players in the transfer portal, like really, really high level guys in the transfer portal, including your starting quarterback this year, including an NFL caliber corner that you brought over from your rival, right? That's so savage. That's just awful if you're a Husky fan.
He's really good too.
Jabbar Muhammad is one of the best corners in college football.
He shut down Franklin in that championship game pretty well.
He's an excellent player. And the fact that you can do that now, right? Where you can have a player who is on the opposite side of the field in a conference championship game in 2023 and takes away your best downfield threat, your best offensive weapon, and you can walk over to him in the handshake line and just be like, hey, leave your phone on. Hey, tell your dad we'll be calling pretty soon. Stuff like you can do that now in college football. Yeah. It's just it's kind of awesome. It's kind of icky depending on which side of it that you find yourself.
I love it. It's great. It's great. It's all the transfer portal stuff. It's great. NIL, awesome. All good. All awesome, Sean. Yes. I love all of it.
Yes, you love it because Uncle Phil makes sure that you guys get what you want. So
all I want in life now, Sean, the Giants have won 3 World Series. Been lucky for that. The Lakers have won a bunch of championships, like 5.5. I count the bubble as a half championship. The Chiefs have won a couple times. Grew up a Niners fan. They won once I was a kid. I just need 1 Oregon championship, Sean. Just 1 Oregon championship. And my insufferable level on social media is going to be at all-time high, even though I've toned it down a little bit recently. I've taken your advice to stop arguing with many people. I just need 1, Sean. I need 1 Oregon championship in my lifetime.
Here's where it gets difficult, though, right? Oregon is dangerously close to being the team that is always really good.
Yes.
But never great.
We're already there. We've been at 2 championships in the last 10 years and lost.
It's just really, really difficult for Oregon to be in that situation where it's like, hey, you were one of the foundational pieces in the Pac-12 as a Pac-12 conference. Like, you had built yourselves to that. And you won conference championships at that level, and you got so close. You were an Arizona State loss away from being a college football playoff team in the 4-team era and all that kind of thing. And then now you're going to a conference where Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, although I'm with you on Penn State. I'm not a big believer in Penn State, where that's your competition. Oh, and by the way, like Washington under Jed Fish, I'm not betting against that team. This year is not going to be their year because of how much they lost roster-wise. But Jed Fish it's going to be Arizona on steroids. It's going to be quick, and it's going to happen, I think, very definitively, where Seattle again becomes a big-time football destination. And you got to compete with that. So you're always going to be there, but are you going to push through? Are you going to be the team that now Ohio State has to reckon with, that now Michigan has to reckon with?
Well, we get Ohio State and Michigan this year, and Wisconsin. I'm eyeing that November 16th game, Sean, to go to hopefully it's a day game, bring my son to Wisconsin. That'd be a lot of fun. We've been close before, right? We played 2 championship games, lost by 3, got blown out on the other one. It does feel like that at times, like we're so close, but sort of yet far. And I firmly believe that 12-team playoff makes it even tougher, right? Because to get through 4 games, 3 or 4 games, you could have a bye of that schedule. You have to have the roster Oregon has. Like, you just have to have it. And
so, look, they have the roster. Do they have the coach who's going to start paying attention to the analytics, and he's going to make decisions in game that don't get questioned up and down all across the country? Number 1 story on Sports
last season. They were 75% on 4th down last season.
I know I know that you are a Lanning acolyte, all right?
Yeah, I
But
like him,
will
coach.
that change for you if he's going for onside kicks that they don't get in a fourth quarter in a game against Ohio State and it doesn't work out?
No, it's certainly fair enough. Here's what I think the other important part about Oregon is, not to make this an Oregon show, but if you're listening now or in, you're like us, and so it's an Oregon show now, is this is, I think, an important talk about Lanning's path, right? He's coached 2 years now as a head coach at Oregon. He's 38 years old. He's 22-5, I believe, maybe 21-5. He's had 5 losses. 4 of them are by 4 points or less, but they're the 4 rivals. 4 rivals, which is not good, and the Georgia loss. Otherwise, he basically blows everyone else out, which is great. But it does take time, Sean, to the things that you're talking about, right? The risk reward. Sometimes it took Kirby Smart 6 years. It took Jim Harbaugh 9 years in Michigan. It does take time. Sometimes it's not all Urban Meyer. You go to year 2, Florida, you win. You go to year 2, Ohio State, you win. But Urban Meyer also was at Bowling Green in Utah beforehand. He had the coaching experience. So I think every year we should see Dan Lanning improve in those ways. Otherwise, he just won't, to your point, he'll just be good enough and not great enough. So he still has time to learn those things. Not the problem, but the pressure of it is that it has to be done now. Like the winning has to happen now. And so how quickly can he sort of figure out how to win in those moments? And look, the team that they have right now is good enough to do it, but can they do it?
We'll see. Big Ten's going to be a fascinating conference. Obviously, the SEC is we've been, I've been kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of the SEC because it's Georgia and Alabama are these juggernauts. But like we talked about already, now you've got, I think, really quality depth of talent in the conference. Kentucky's going to be a top 25 team. Missouri's going to be a top 10 team. Ole Miss is going to be a top 10 team. Tennessee is going to be a top 25 team. So it's going to be fun. And the 12-team college football playoff, even though Jeff Schwartz has convinced most of the folks that I talked to that, look, it's not going to change the outcome on who wins a college football national championship. It's not, but it's going to keep us all engaged a little bit longer, and it's going to keep that hope that you talked about spring football representing. It's going to keep the hope alive for a couple extra weeks for teams like the Utes, maybe, for teams like Oklahoma State, maybe, for teams like NC State, or for Clemson, perhaps.
Absolutely. It will do all those things. It'll make for, I think, more exciting games down the stretch of the season as teams are contending for those spots, right, Sean? They're contending for that playoff spot. It won't make losing in a conference championship game the end of your season, right? You'll get to probably still go to, a bowl game, a playoff game a lot of times. So no, you're right about those things. But I think it does favor the teams with all that depth. And so some of these teams that get a chance to be in the playoff, it's fun, but don't have a chance to win. Can I end with the Savage or Stupid? Can we end with one?
I have one more football question I want to ask.
Let's go.
You.
Okay, go.
Then we'll get to some Savage or Stupid / hilarious story for you from my trip to Lowe's.
Oh, I love it.
Colorado, the University of Colorado has Shedeur Sanders, Coach Prime, Travis Hunter. He's already talking about these are the 6 teams I'll allow these guys to go play for in the NFL. Last year, Colorado captured the attention of celebrities, of the nation at large, of a college football public that was in it for the soap opera.
Yep.
Does that happen again in 2024, or have we already seen this experiment fizzle out?
Well, doesn't it have to be with, I think, how fast they start winning? I mean, last season they're 3-0 and everyone was on them right away. But if they end up, starting the season 2-2, even go back to last year, if they lost to TCU, are we even having this discussion about Colorado last season? They had that discussion because they beat TCU as 21-point underdogs. They play North Dakota State, not an easy start. Then they're at Nebraska and at Colorado State, 2 teams that easily could beat them. I mean, they got to start 3-0 again, I feel like, right? To feel that same sort of attention they got last season. And I will say this, though, because of the conference TV schedules, I mean, the networks now, like Fox doesn't do the Big 12, I don't think. So, like, is it going to be the same sort of where you have, two of these, two competing game days there, and everyone talking about your school and program. So I would say they got to win like 9 or 10 games, I think, to have the same appeal they had last year.
Will either Shador or Travis Hunter be a Heisman Trophy finalist?
I actually think Travis Hunter would have the better chance.
I think Travis Hunter is going to be, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be playing all conference level football on both sides of the ball. And that has to make you a Heisman Trophy finalist. I think he would have been in New York this year if he hadn't got hurt. He was just, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's their best player. I did end up looking at that video of Shador not going to class, going to class without anything. It looked like me in my senior year. But Dion, what's so interesting is like Dion, we like this about Dion. He preaches, the etiquette in the classroom, and of course every coach does this, but we get to see Dion video wise. I wonder if he punishes Shador for somehow for this.
I think that we found out last year, there's a blind spot. Coach Prime has a blind spot for his own kids.
Of course.
And all of us do. A lot of, who doesn't, right? But that, Shiloh did some things, said some things on the field that anybody else in that program, he would have, embarrassed for doing so. And he didn't. No, so I think that he's just, and sometimes Coach Prime is just dad. And for better or worse, Shador has some personality traits that reflect that, we'll say.
Yeah. All right. What's your savage or stupid with Lowe's?
Okay. I just have to tell you this story.
Please.
Maybe this is, I'm sure it has happened to everybody. When you feel like you're in an episode of a show that you love, or you're just like, Curb. I can't believe this is happening to me in real life. You and I both love Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it just felt like that was happening. So we have a window with the privacy glass in the front of our house, that happens to go into our bathroom and closet area. And my wife was like, she drove home one night while I was in there, and she was like, dude, we got to get, that privacy glass is not private enough. We got to get a shade put over that window. I was like, okay. And you go to Lowe's, they have the aisle where you can get the pre-cut. You go in and you're just like, my window opening is this wide. Cut the blinds this wide for me. And so I go in there. I'm like, hey, I got the baby. I'm holding the baby. I'm just like, I need it, 35 inches wide. And this gal that, you push the button to come have an associate come help you. She shows up and she's a little flustered already, a little bit busy already, right? It's just not her day. And I'm just like, hey, I just need this cut real quick. That's it. She's like, okay. And the machine that they use, apparently it's got this little computer screen, and she pushes the button and it doesn't pop open. So you can put the thing in there. It doesn't pop open. It's supposed to pop open automatically by itself. And she's like, oh my gosh, I got to open this. How do I open this? And so she's like yanking on it, but it's really long. It's like a 10-foot machine, right? So she pulls on it from one side, and then she goes over the other side, pulls up from the other side. And it's like opening a drawer, but having to do it, side by side. And she starts complaining like, oh my God, I injured my hand. My hand hurts so bad. I only have one hand. I can't use both hands. I'm like, I can help you. And she's just like, no, I'm not allowed to let you touch it. It's like a liability thing. I'm like, all right. She gets it open. She punches in the numbers. It cuts the thing, cuts it wrong measurement. I'm just like, ugh. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. You recut it. I'm going to go look for the other stuff I'm here for. She's like, okay. So I walk off. All right.
Oh boy. Bad mistake.
No, I walk off, and then I hear her on the little intercom, can somebody please come help me in window coverings? I'm trying the machine's not working properly.
Wait, she said all that on the
oh my gosh. She's just airing her grievance. It was amazing. And then this is the best part. Okay. This is the most important part. And I've injured my hand. I only have one hand. Can someone please help me? I need two hands to help me. And I'm just like, wow, she is having a bad day. So after hearing this, I leave the paint aisle and I wander back in. The individual, the other associate at Lowe's who showed up to help her after she spent a good 30 seconds complaining about her hand injury and how she needs hands. And I only have one hand.
Please tell this person had like a sling or something, or like was missing an arm.
Geoff, it was a man with one hand. I walk into the aisle, and it's a guy who's probably in his late 20s, Lowe's associate, and he has one functional arm.
Oh my God.
And the other, which was clearly, affected by some sort of birth defect or whatever. That's, it's like a vestigial arm. He has one good, and I'm just like, oh no. I walk, and he's helping her. He's using one hand, and she's using one hand, and I just could not believe that I was not with anybody, any other adult that could appreciate that moment. But I'm glad I got to tell the story here. So, Lowe's, please, I only have one hand. I've hurt my hand. I only have one hand. Can someone help me? And the guy that shows up to help.
Did you just bust out laughing too?
I had to turn around because I walked in. I was, oh. And you could tell the guy showed up, right? And she was like very flustered, probably almost on the verge of tears about the fact that she couldn't use both of her hands. And he shows up and he's just like,
I'll do it. Fine. I'll do it with one hand.
You were saying, so anyway, it felt like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
That's so good. All right. My one very quickly, my wife got a promotion and she sometimes it's a new job and she sort of sometimes like doesn't know like what's her job sometimes some days. So I asked her this morning, Sean, I said, what do you got for work today? She goes, oh, I have to make a presentation for so-and-so for her boss. I was like, oh, okay. Like, are you ready for that? She goes, well, I was working on my slides for it. I called my teammate and I said like, hey, like, can you help me with this presentation? And she goes, no, dummy, we're presenting to you. You're not presenting to us. so she's like, oh, okay, whoopsie. So she's still figuring it out, Sean. She has this whole she's all ready to present because to herself. And I asked her this. I said, well, what are you doing now? She goes, oh, I'm going over to the hospital to be presented to.
Never in my life have I loved somebody who I've never met as much as I love your wife as a character in my life.
Like, oh my God. She said to me, she goes, she said, yeah, Amber said to me, no, we're presenting to you.
Awesome.
So I don't know how she does it. It's mind blowing. It's how she survives in life somehow.
Wow, just incredible stuff.
My dog is now figured out. He's like, now I've slept for 1 hour. It's time to play. All right, buddy.
All right.
You want to say? Oh, geez, buddy. You want to say hi?
Fo, come look at me.
Oh, geez, dude. Look
at that beautiful creature.
He's finally. How the kids have finally like accepted him because this past week they made their own nicknames for him that make no sense. Like that's how you know that like they're like in now. His own nicknames. And he starts like he's now snuggling them more and hugging with them and loving on them. So,
what is that collar? What is it? Is that like a
e-collar?
Like a Gucci leather collar?
No, it's e-collar.
Oh,
okay. It's right here. Yeah. All right. I think we did it, Sean.
All right,
everyone.
Gang. Well done. Good game.
Talk to you later this week, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.